Merilyn, and welcome to Real Estate, Wealth, and Overall Health.
This is season 2, episode 5, and we have a fantastic show for you today. We have actually a special guest, TSIRLIN from Proper Home Inspections. He's going to be on to talk about some myths in the home inspection world, the purpose of a home inspection, and as usual, we're going to go over what we're seeing in the market and tips for sellers on listing properties. And I think for buyers, we got a lot of hesitant buyers out there right now. They don't know where the market's going, so maybe we have some advice for them today. So we've got a great show. Remember, follow us on Spotify and we're on YouTube, and subscribe if you like what you're hearing. So I guess first and foremost, Merilyn, I guess what are you seeing in the market? Last month we talked about that, but it's a new month. So what's going on?
Okay, so right after elections, we did notice, let's back that up. Right before voting, we noticed there was a little bit of sluggishness with buyers. There were people that were still nervous and kind of on the fence whether or not to pull the trigger. So we were it was slower. The listings, even the showings on the listings that we carry were a little bit slower. And even the office was telling us that the phones were just, not as busy. Right after the election, I would say within a week, boom, there was like 3 sales we made within a week's period. I think it was within 8-9 days, we had 3 sales on the board. So I think that just goes back to, we've discussed this before, but confidence with, economics and what's happening, job certainty and things like that. It's been pretty steady within the last, I'd say, 4 or 5 weeks. It's been busier. And we've even had some pretty interesting sales of ones that we put up and we thought, this is going to take a little time. And we would tell our clients, patience is the name of the game. And then boom, within a week or 2, they sold. And when we would, people were surprised and shocked. And we were too, because we were confident in our abilities. And we always tried to aim, for successful results in the shortest amount of time. But there were a few sales, like Woodmount and even Yonge Street that we were oh wow, that sold relatively quickly. And
I feel like it's crazy because, sometimes you'll get clients asking us, well, what's your house going to sell for? And we look at comps, and stuff. But at the end of the day, if you have something very unique, like one we sold was, not a tear down, but a full reno, and that's a specific type of buyer. And in this type of market where construction costs are high, that it's hard. Sometimes those people aren't there, or there might be 4 or 5 of them looking for that. So it's really interesting to see over weeks or over months who's around. We have another one coming up soon. That's a 2-bedroom bungalow, and so it's a beautiful house. We have 2 coming up like that. Actually, 2 2-bedroom bungalows, one in Vaughan and one's in Toronto. So and a 2-bedroom bungalow is beautiful, but again, it's for a certain type of person because there are people with growing families that it might be too small for them. So if there are people waiting for that, they might jump on it right away and will pay. But there are other times it might sit a bit because people are like, well, it's not for me. You got to wait for that right buyer. So I'm kind of I'm feeling that.
So I'm actually going to somewhat, usually this doesn't happen, but I'm actually going to somewhat disagree with Adriano here. And I'm going to tell you why. So we found out from our broker of record, who's very well connected and owns, combined with the sister company, 18 locations across Ontario. So we found out she had a meeting about 2 weeks ago with builders, and all projects are actually on hold unless it's the tail end of the inventory, so they've already launched. There is no new projects going to be launched within the next 2 years. That's what we've been told.
For the bigger builders. There might be small ones.
Exactly. So having said that, I actually think that if you're in the location that's desirable and your price point, like the one bungalow that we're talking about in Toronto, is going to be listed under $999, and that is not an offer date. It does have a finished basement with a separate entrance so you can rent it out. It does have parking. It does have a nice fenced backyard, and it's fully renovated. Everything is brand new. If you want more details, send us
I'd like more details. What are we talking about here?
So my point is, I think that with limited options, and if it's in the right location, and I think if it's in a price point where a lot more, under $1 million in Toronto, there are a lot of people looking to get in. Actually, we had a call today for an evaluation, and that's where her comfort level is. I actually think products like that will do well because it's supply and demand, right? So even for qualifying for a mortgage, you have that option with a separate entrance, finished basement, basement with its, laundry and a kitchen and everything is new. So I think products like that will still sell relatively quickly because, again, there's a lot of people that would want something like that as an option.
I agree. I think like the condos, on the condo side, like we've been discussing, or some of them, if you've been in a condo for a while, I think you're pretty good. But the newer construction, the pre-cons, is where you're still seeing a lot of inventory, a lot of numbers not crunching for rentability and that kind of stuff.
A lot of assignment sales as well. We're getting calls almost every week about assignment sales. People, willing to walk away from deposits.
Yeah, or even getting it, selling it for less than what they even paid. So
people just not wanting to close and walk away.
So before we get into our next statement, what do you think we have in store for the summer market? We have people saying it's going to be a traditional summer where it gets slow. We have other people saying it's going to be a crazy summer because there's been a lot of pent up demand, a lot of people hesitancy, and they're going to push. So what do you think?
I think we have an upcoming bank announcement first week of June where it's told that rates should be going down. So I think that the summer will be still steady. Of course, summer months are not super busy because there's still a lot of people that are traveling. They have cottages. They go down to their places, whether it's like, again, cottages or Florida, Europe. So there's a lot of people traveling, time off of school if they have families and children. So I think that the summer will be steady, but it's not going to be, we're not going to see it go like this or anything like that. Like we saw obviously when like COVID happened. But I actually do think that next year we'll have an uprise and it will actually pick up because if rates continue to, drop and again, consumer confidence in the economy, this all is predicated, of course, on what's happening with economics. But I do think that next year will actually be a really good year. That's my thoughts and maybe a bit of my positivity, but that's what I think.
Yeah, and I am seeing like a lot, I'm working with buyers and I'm seeing like a lot of good properties selling quickly. Like you go on the weekend and then by Monday it's like sold conditional. So if no new inventory is coming on and this inventory is coming off the market, it's gonna, like right now we're more in a balanced market depending on where you are. It might tend to go into more of a seller's market, which then means more multiple offers, less inventory, and we get into that again, potentially.
Yes.
So I guess with sorry.
I was actually going to ask you, so Adriano, what's your advice, because you have lately been working with a lot of buyers. What's your advice to the buyers that are, they're interested, they'd like to make a move, but there's some hesitancy there. What's the advice that you give them?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends first off what type of buyer it is, because there's different types. I mean, if you're a first-time buyer, I feel like the motivation there is, sometimes they're comfortable, especially if they're living with family or something, they don't have big expenses to go into something with going from like $0 or $1,000 a month to like $3 is a big jump, so they have to be prepared for that. Upsizers, that's basically, it doesn't matter how the market is with an upsizer. It's like if they sell, they're going to buy high and low, and they have to move because of certain things in life.
That space.
But I feel like in general, you're never going to time a market. You're never going to time the top. You're never going to time the bottom. And I always tell people to look at their payments monthly. If you can afford that, then and at that rate, then you know that you could make that as long as you're not going to be house poor. And I feel like you should look at that. You got to look at it as an investment for savings. You're putting money away. You're paying down equity. It is a privilege to own a property in Toronto or in the GTA. Everyone thinks that everyone should be able to do that, but unfortunately that isn't the case. So if you can get in now, I would suggest if the numbers make sense to do that. Don't become house poor, because you never know what rules might come in that might change things like that, and at least you can get in. So that would be, if you're on the fence about buying, get pre-approved, talk to a realtor to see what that amount of money is where it's gonna put you, if it's something that you like, and then start looking. And don't be afraid. If you see something you like, jump in, because I'll tell you, in 5 to 10 years from now, when you look back on it, I feel like that little bit of difference isn't gonna make a huge difference, down the road.
Okay. So one last question. I'm a buyer and I start looking, let's say with you, and I'm happy and I get excited and I think I found the one. So what happens? Should I have you come over first and evaluate my property, or should I find something I like first and then, whatever it is that I could get for my property?
So you're a buyer and you already own, so you're not a first-time buyer.
Yes, I own a property and I'm looking to upgrade, like you said, upsize. What do you recommend? Do you come in first?
So we talk about this, like we talked about it on a few podcasts if you want to listen to it more extensively, but the biggest thing is knowing what your property is going to be worth, and especially after fees. We've gone in and a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to clear, 200 or 250. But the reality of it is after fees and lawyers' costs and land transfer tax when you purchase again, that's going to be a bit less. So you have to take that into account. And then you have to make sure the move works for them and that with the money that they have and their qualifications to get pre-approved, that they can afford something that's going to be worth. You don't want to be going in, putting offers on places and you're conditional. You can't sell your house or you're not pre-approved. And it's just a big waste of time and emotions for everyone. So my suggestion would be you have a talk with a realtor, you get pre-approved at the same time, you crunch your numbers.
Yes.
Once you know your numbers, you start picking the areas because sometimes your numbers will eliminate a lot of areas for you. And then you start and you move forward and you'll find something that you like. So that's my suggestion for buyers. Now, one more thing before we bring in our special guest is the importance of listing correctly. Listing price. So if you're a seller, please listen to this. If you don't listen to anything else we do, listen to this.
Here it is.
No, it's very important to list your property at a price that is going to sell in today's market. That's my opinion, and I'm sure and I want to get your thoughts on it. When you talk to a seller and they're looking to buy and they see a property on the market for 100 days, they're like, oh, this is not worth this. We're going to go in 100 grand less. But on their property, when it's sitting 100 days or 150, like, no, I'm not budging anything. My house is the best, right? That works. But so for you, when you go in for a listing appointment and you're talking to somebody, when you explain to them the listing strategy or the importance of being at market value, like how do you go about that and what do you feel, what are the detriments if they list too high, let's say?
I think
and the other question is, what happens if you feel that you list too low? What happens in that situation? So answer those questions.
So we'll start with the first question, what happens if you just list too high? So it's just going to sit, right? And then it becomes frustrating. You're just, as time starts to go on, days become weeks and then months, you start, looking at, I would probably do the same. I'd be looking at, the real estate agent saying, hey, why isn't it selling? Why am I not getting any offers? And then I feel like you're chasing the market, you're trying to catch up, and it's not a good situation for anybody, really. It's not a good situation for the seller, it's not a good situation for the agents, and it's also not a good situation for the buyers coming through, because if they're not making offers with every showing that goes by, I know what it's like. The seller
if you even get a showing, that's the other thing. If we even get showings,
and the sellers are like, what's the feedback? What are their thoughts? Why, and then you start becoming, you almost feel like you're coming from a position of like, just not at an advantage. So if you underlist the property, what we've actually seen happen a few times here in Etobicoke, there was actually one specifically in West Dean area in Etobicoke, that it naturally went into a bidding war. And the same thing happened actually with St. George, same thing, that it just kind of like, they just, if you're underlisted, there's a lot of agents that are, will know that, and they'll bring their clients, and then boom, those properties went natural into bidding wars. So, and it actually did end up, I think, with West Dean, it ended up going over asking naturally without an offer date, and the same thing with the second one. It naturally went, I think it went 9,000 from asking price, so they got very close to asking.
But it was just the timing, it was quick, no conditions. But
and we had the buyers on those properties, so it wasn't that we underpriced it not knowing. It was actually our buyers put bids on them. We didn't make a deal on those properties. Actually, they just bought with us last week.
And so I guess the big thing with selling and listing too high, I guess it's like days on the market. The longer you're on the market, like, you have to look in your neighborhood to see what the average is. But if you're longer than the average, people are going to start looking at the property and they're going to say, what's wrong with this property? They're going to say it's either too high and we're going to lowball it, and you're going to end up getting offers lower than even if you were priced accordingly, or they're going to say, something's wrong with the house. Why isn't it selling? It looks good. Why isn't it selling? And then they're going to lowball you on that because something must be wrong. It's been sitting for so long. Why is it sitting there? Right?
Or it could just be like there's one right now on my street that it's actually a lovely property because I showed it to my buyers, and it's not that it even just got low balls or anything. It just actually expired.
So it just,
exactly. They're the original owners. The sellers are still there, and it just came off the market. And
So what we're saying is, if you're looking to sell, make sure you take an educated price from a realistic price from educated realtors who know the business, know the area, and you can skew off of it a little bit, but not not a ton.
And having said that, also I just want to let everyone know, like I get it. We always want to try a little bit higher. You want to give it a try at first, and sometimes I think just goes back to, like we said, if you ever feel you're kind of underpricing, remember those two stories about West Dean and the two houses in Etobicoke. There will be someone that will recognize that, and they will like jump at the opportunity to pick up a property like under market value essentially. So that's always what can happen as well.
So I guess with that being said, we're going to bring on our special guest and introduce him. It is Ben STIRLIN from Proper Home Inspections. Stay tuned. We're going to have him right away.
We're back, and we're here with Ben STIRLIN from Proper Home Inspections. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So Ben is, we've used him a lot, so we value his opinions and thoughts on everything. But the reason why we want to bring a home inspector in is because people have a lot of, thoughts and questions about home inspections, what a, home inspector does. And we want to maybe bust some of those myths and also get your opinion on a few things. So I think first going in, I think the biggest thing that we want to know, and a lot of people want to know, is what do you think the purpose of a home inspection is?
Yeah, absolutely. So technically speaking, what it is a visual observation of the readily available systems and components of the home. Like that's the technical definition. So in other words, it's just an observation of the home and the systems
on a particular day.
On the particular day, on that day. That's actually an important one. That's a good point. And so there are some myths to this that we trying to dispel over time. Now that the age of the internet and all this information is available, people understand more. But some people there is still confusion as to what it is. Some people think you have X-ray vision, you can see behind the walls and find absolutely everything that is wrong, any issues. But even with these great tools at our disposals, we don't know everything, but whatever we can see that's available, that's how it works. So unless I have permission to break a wall open and check behind it, I don't do that.
Yeah, and that's so what you're basically saying is, home inspection, you go in and what you're trying to do is give a buyer an idea of what they're basically buying to the best of your ability and from what you can see, and just to make sure that the house, because obviously no house is ever going to be 100%, even a new one, and we're going to get into that. But it's just to give a homeowner confidence in knowing that what is good, and maybe certain things that they should keep an eye on, or maybe have to repair over time. 100%. Right?
So we like to give them the information of what the deficiencies are in the home, so they know what they're getting themselves into. And if they're okay with it, they can proceed, and otherwise.
I mean, you're not in the you're not in the business of kind of breaking deals and stuff. You're just giving an information, and then people can make their own decisions on
Absolutely.
that. Right?
I'm just like the middleman. I'm there to tell you, like, here are the findings, and you do what you will with them.
Yeah, because I guess people are all different. Like, you might get someone who's handy, or they got an uncle who's handy and they can fix a lot of things. And you get people who don't know how to do anything, and they you get a loose plug and they want to back out of a deal because the plug is loose or something like that, right? So then you got to talk them off a ledge. That's where me and Merilyn go.
Absolutely. And so to your point, actually, it's important to note that as an inspector, your job is not to give your opinion about the deficiencies. You're just there to report it.
Just to report it.
Just to report it. So I can't tell people, hey, like, okay, this plug is not working, like, walk away from the deal. Like, that's not how it goes, right? Your job is not to sway people one way or the other. You're just saying, here's the information, here's the deficiency.
Exactly.
Speak with your realtor. You guys can decide.
So you're like TSN. He's like just giving the Leafs.
Exactly right.
Breaking down why they lost the series.
Exactly right.
Exactly. It's not the play-by-play. Here's the information. It's factual, and then what are the options that we have to address some some of the deficiencies, because with all different properties, there's always going to be something. I know Ben and I have worked together for probably
long time, yeah.
over,
oh
I don't know, maybe like over
Years
10
and
years.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of properties. We've done properties that backed onto trains. We've done fixer-uppers. We've done pre-lists. So if we do offer dates, we've had Ben come in and do the property before it goes for sale so that we can have it sent out to any potential buyers as well. And also representing, the sales process as well. So if our clients purchase, he can come in and also inspect the property that they're looking to purchase as well. So so Ben does it all.
A lot of good times.
Yeah.
What I like about Ben too is that he's able to, like, if the client has questions a few months after closing, he's always there. He'll review the home inspection again and give his opinions on what needs to be done, or try to put them in contact with the right people, which is always nice. So we're going to go into the myth section. I mean, we talked about some of it, but let's dig a little bit deeper now. So there's some big home inspection myths. I think the first one here is, do you look behind walls? I know we touched on this, but I think there's buyers out there that think you're gonna go in there and you got X-ray vision glasses, and you're gonna figure out every little issue that's happened in this house, especially these old ones, from when it was built till now. And what's the reality of the home inspection on that and something like that?
For sure. So the reality is, like, touching up on the definition, that they're visual, readily observable, accessible inspections. So I personally try to get in wherever I can. Like, if I see something like a opening and I know I can barely fit in there, I'll still try to, see as much as I can see.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, for example, if there's some mold growth happening behind a wall, even with my thermal cameras and everything at my disposal, if it's not bad enough, you won't detect it.
You won't detect
100%. And for example, like, if an attic access hatch is like screwed in for whatever reasons, like, technically we're not supposed to go in there unless I get permission from the sellers or whoever, right? Which I generally try to do, because that's an odd thing to do, is to barricade your access. That's your attic, right? Because it's good. Yeah, right. So we try to address those. Like, I would just point out limitations that we have, and then sort of deal with them this way.
Yeah, and I guess that comes, because this comes to another point. Like, there's been times that, I'm not sure if we have this, but you do a home inspection on a house, and they might have boxes in the basement piled up because they're decluttering, or they put it all in an area, and then when they move out, all of a sudden you realize that there was a leak or a mold back there, and that's another thing where you can't be moving boxes and stuff, right?
So it's also a very interesting one. So storage is also, we consider that a limitation, and understandably so. Like, when people move, you pack stuff up, you have to put it somewhere. Not everyone can go and rent like a little storage locker and just put everything there. So we do like, if it's enough of it where it prevents me from seeing important things, I just note it down as a limitation. I mean, if there's like 3, 5, 6 boxes, I will move it where it won't take me half the day to get in there. But otherwise, it's unfortunately a limitation that we have.
And then it's kind of we have that conversation, but you hope and pray that it's good.
But to your point, it does happen. It does happen where, like, you have a full garage of things. Like, sometimes I'll open the garage door to inspect the garage, and I just close it right away because there's so much stuff there that I can't
everything with the kitchen sink.
Everything was thrown in the garage for the sale.
Like, to stage the home or whatever it is. And then you discover that once you remove all the items, that if there's some deficiencies there that we couldn't see, then.
And I mean, people got to realize, like, they're not doing that to hide something. It's just sometimes people need to declutter for staging a house, so they put it where they can, right? Other times people, I'm sure, do that to hide things, and that becomes one of those things where you have to try your best.
And unfortunately, we will never know the answer.
And you will never know the answer to that. So, myth 1: you guys can't look at everything because it's impossible unless you rip down all the drywall, look behind it, and then drywall and tape again. That's a whole other problem.
Yeah, it's a whole other.
So I guess number 2.
Yes. Okay. Number 2. So if it's a brand new build, if it's a brand new property, no one's ever lived in it. No one's ever used the kitchen. Do we need a home inspection?
So the short answer is you probably want to,
Okay.
regardless. So there are, carry-on warranties available these days, and they cover certain tiers of warranty.
If they applied for it.
If they applied for it, if the
Right.
builder,
Yeah.
I mean, most of the times, if it's a big builder, they typically
registered.
would have them, but people wouldn't know what to look for
Right.
a lot of times. And so I've seen it with brand new builds. Sometimes there's cracks in the foundations and things like that. So this would be a good tool to use because, like I say, sometimes even if it's in front of you, you won't know what to look for, right? And I have seen it, and so it's always good to do that for sure. Good practice.
Peace of mind.
That peace of mind is a big thing for buyers, right? Especially you're spending so much money on these properties, right? That you'd want to know what you're getting yourself into, even if it's new. All right. Yeah. 100%.
I mean, that is good. I'm sure there's houses that are built that are, terrible that are new, and then you have houses that are built 50, 60 years ago, and they're built, some of them are built sturdy and solid, and maybe they have maybe minor plumbing issues and electrical and stuff like that, but they're built, to last, right? And I'm sure you see that kind
100%.
of stuff, right?
So what happens is, like, when I go into a home and somebody calls me to do an inspection, and I'm doing like my research on the house, and I check the age. This generally gives me an idea right away of what sort of systems and components to expect to see in the home. And then when I do it, and I can say, okay, usually, if it's like a 70-year-old home, if the plumbing system is old, I can, if it hasn't been changed, I can expect to see this and this and that.
Right.
And these are the deficiencies that are typical for this age of home. And then when I don't see them, I'm like, oh, that's great, good news, right? When the home either has been updated or they've been performing better than typical,
Yeah, because I guess that comes up, because there's certain areas in Maryland where, if someone wants to be in High Park or certain areas where there's sometimes there's termites or knob and tube. It's just because you're in an area that the houses are old. So I guess when Ben would come through and do an inspection, if someone wants to live there, you have to expect that you might have cast iron pipes, or you might have some knob and tube wiring that's been in there. Like, that shouldn't scare you away from that house, because you're buying in a neighborhood that's going to be typical, unless, like you said, they've updated it, right? So
we've definitely seen a lot. We've seen mold, we've seen Kitech plumbing, we've seen, knob and tube. So we've seen quite a bit. Yeah, in some cases asbestos, which has to be sent out to test, and the companies actually in the States that we would work with. But we've seen it all. We've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, as they say. And actually, funny enough, my real father was actually in that movie. So
no way.
Fun fact.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, though, to your point about these systems, going back to what the purpose of an inspection is to inform people and educate them. So if there's knob and tube, if there's Kitech, if there's this and that, as long as you relay the information and they know what they're about to get into, they can make this informed decision to say, okay, if I have the budget for it, I'll change it, or this and that. So keeping that in mind, that's one of the main reasons to get one.
That's great
100%.
too, exactly, to budget that in. If there is a cost associated with the repairs that the buyers are willing to undertake, it's a really good point.
Yeah, and the other thing, before we get into the last myth, what I want to say is, when we go into home inspections, the whole thing for us is not to go into a home inspection to ask for money back. A lot of people do that. You're there to get an idea of what you're getting in the house. Now, if there's something major that was unseen, or if you go in the attic and maybe there's vermiculite or something in there, some kind of asbestos, or a major structural issue, maybe at that point you go back and you try to remedy that, because that's going to affect the sale. If you back out of the deal, that that seller's now going to have to expose that moving forward. So sometimes they'll clean it up, or they'll do something like that. So that is really good to know. It's just good to know what you're getting into. So I do feel like home inspections are important, and they do help. I guess, yeah. So
100%. No, I was going to say, and that's the other part of it, is it's a great tool that you can use as a buyer to try and potentially negotiate. If there are these issues, you and your agent, Adriano and Merilyn, of course, can go to the sellers and say, hey, look, here's what the inspector found.
Yes,
the roof needs to be replaced, or A, B, C, whatever. This is generally the cost, or we've gotten estimates from, these contractors, and you can try to negotiate that way. It's a really great tool for that as well.
I feel like if they put those certain things like age of roof in the listing, that's one thing. But if it's something that's hidden, or or you don't know about, then definitely like it's a good tool to go back with, which is nice.
Totally.
So I guess the last myth question quickly is there ever, I feel like I know the answer, but is there ever 100% perfect home? New, old, renovated, built from scratch? Is there such thing as the 100%?
If you had to take a guess,
I'm going to say nothing's 100% in life, so I'm going to say
that's
not
absolutely
100%.
right. That's absolutely correct. There's nothing, no house is built perfectly. There's some that are near perfect. Like I can count probably on both hands over the years how many homes I've done where there's been like barely anything. Like maybe like one or two minor things, and these are not always brand new homes.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, this is awesome. Like, this is good, right? So a lot of it is like the pride of ownership. So people really maintain and take care of the homes like constantly, right? Because a home is like a car. You have to do maintenance, oil changes on the car. Home is no different. There's a checklist, for every season that you should be doing, and if you neglect it, it'll show. So when I go into a house, like as soon as I start the inspection, if I'm already starting to find deficiencies and whatever, and I'm assuming that it's going to be like that for the rest of it, because there's certain tells, for sure. When you do it long enough, as long as I've been doing it, you can sort of, it's like a precursor, right? And then other times when things just start off great and it goes smoothly, then love to see that. Yeah. So, but the answer is no. There's generally no 100%.
Okay. I guess the final question I wanted to ask, and I know with Merilyn is, and this is kind of a little bit, it goes hand in hand. So what are deal breakers and what are some things that you think would be okay? And I guess when I say that, I know it's always subjective to like a buyer on what they feel is big, but I mean, I guess you've done enough home inspections to see, there's certain things where you're like, that might be a concern.
Right.
And there's other things like that's nothing, like don't worry about it, it's normal. Like what are maybe some things you see, or
so you mean like a big hole in the foundation, something like that? You could peek your head through.
Or what have you seen? Like, what are some crazy things that you've seen that you're like, I don't know about this one?
Yeah, so probably the worst ones are when it comes to structural and foundational things. I mean, roof, you can tell it's generally one of those, but it's mainly structure and foundation. So things, they generally are attributed to either century homes or homes that are like built with concrete block or even stone, like back when you see like significant movement, people typically, unless it's something that they do for work or they have kind of some hookups for contractors, that's generally very expensive and extensive work. Sometimes you have to jack the house up, like it gets very, very invasive and expensive. So a lot of times the stress and of all that alone, people don't want to deal with that.
And for structure, are there any things, like I remember, like what kind of, you see cracks, are there certain cracks that you're like, this is going to be a structural issue, and then other ones are just like, it's kind of settling and stuff?
Yeah, so there's a term called crack analysis. It's quite funny, but it's when we analyze the cracking. So sometimes it's very insignificant and minor in nature, and sometimes it can be something more serious. So you have to evaluate the whole envelope, the whole building envelope as a whole, to see where they are, how many there are. It's the most difficult part about analyzing this is you don't know. This is a snapshot for me. So I'm there that particular day, that particular time.
Exactly.
I don't know over time. I don't know when it happened. I don't know if it's still moving. I don't know. Like there's a big checklist.
Was it raining that day? Is there going to be a leak issue?
What's going on? And so I just have to analyze them based on what's happening that particular time and day. And so a lot of times with structure, we have to advise like further evaluation. So we're like basically general practitioners. So we're like a family doctor. So when you go to a family doctor, you have a GP. So we're like GPs. You have a pain somewhere, something hurts, you go to the GP and say, okay, this hurts. And they send you to a specialist. So we're like the GPs. So I'll identify the deficiencies. And if it's significant enough, then you would send it to a specialist, a contractor, a structural engineer, somebody, depending on what the issue is. So that's how it would work.
And we have done that. We have done that before.
Totally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Same situation. There was a property in Brampton. I actually ended up I represented both buyer and seller. Same thing. We got in a company that was Leak Solutions, and they came in and warranted their work for, I believe it was 5 years with a certificate. So there are a lot of times, it's normal to find things depending on, obviously the extents. But there are definitely remedies for, I think, most things that you can find in property deficiencies.
100%. And in fact, like a lot of times, the solutions to these issues, not structural and whatever, but a lot of times the solutions to certain issues are a lot more simple than people think.
Yeah.
And this is where the inspector Ben comes in and helps kind of alleviate.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if it's serious, there's no sugarcoating it, but right.
Of course.
But so on that note, maybe you could tell, and this is again subjective, what are some things in a house where you're going through and you're like, okay, this I'm gonna do, but it's kind of it's minimal, let's say, they're not what are some examples? So for people listening or viewing, if they're gonna do a home inspection and they see that, not to kind of get worried and
Totally. Well, I mean, there are, how severe they are in nature can also be subjective as well.
Yeah.
That's why, across the board, I've seen, because, a lot of times I'll come in to do a buyer inspection, and then the listing side already did a pre-list inspection.
Yes. Yeah.
And if it's available to me, I'll just take a few minutes and I'll sit and I'll sift through it just to see what,
kind of take a peek.
100%. And sometimes you find, because different inspectors, explain different ways, and sometimes, it is because it's subjective. My opinion can differ in severity than another inspector's. But to me, the way that I do it is I have a mental list of deal breakers or big ticket items, and then small potato stuff. So things like, doors, the door lock not working if it doesn't latch, if a window, hardware has some trouble. So the electrical outlets, if an outlet doesn't work or it's not grounded, or if, you have to evaluate if it's the whole system, if it's just a one-off. Usually these are very cheap and quick fixes. But some inspectors will tell people, you have to change this and all this, and
they blow up the deal.
What's that? And then they blow up the deal. And it also goes,
Spook the buyers.
but it also goes back to the point of of not giving your opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Where sometimes they do, but if people, for example, if people ask me, so a lot of times if the client is there after the inspection, we get together and we go generally over, right? We generally go over the findings, and then they'll be in the report anyway, but I just explain, okay, this and that, and they'll ask me, is this a big deal? And I, if it is, then we say yeah, and if no, I say, look, usually more times than most, it's not a big deal. But if there are things that need to be investigated further, then I don't know the answer to that, right? So, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's great. I mean, I'm sure we could go on all day with stories and stuff like that. But what I wanted to just say is that Ben is great. If you ever have questions about stuff, I'm sure you can find him online. We'll put his contact and handle there. Or if you do need a home inspector, but he is very great. We've used him a lot of times, and we're glad that you could come in and share your knowledge on our podcast.
It's my pleasure. I actually, on my way here, I was thinking I should have done a little show and tell, brought my tools and show people what.
Maybe we can bring you
maybe
back.
We'll do it next time. Why not? Have the drone flying around the office.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And one last thing, Ben, let everyone know, what areas do you cover?
So I generally service Toronto, GTA. I do, some Simcoe, Durham, Peel, Halton. I do, I'll generally go out to wherever people need me to go. If if it's out of my service area, I'll just tack a little on for gas, or for the distance. But otherwise, it's a pretty wide area. Yeah.
Well, you're our guy, and we're very confident in your abilities, and definitely highly recommend it to anyone out there who's in need of a home inspector, for sure.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
So final thoughts, Adriano, what are we doing to take care of our overall health?
Well, I continue, actually last week I was a little bit under the weather. I don't know what's going on, but it knocked me out, my energy. But I tried as best as I could to, even do light workout, maybe some yoga, some stretching, just to keep the body moving. I tried to, catch up on my sleep. I feel like sometimes, when we're going hard, we're showing houses, we got inspections, rights to revisit people on the phone a lot, just, a lot of conversations, whether they're good or bad, it drains us. And I'm sure it drains a lot of people out there. And it's very important to, to do that. And also those little ginger energy shots. Those things will wake you up really quickly in the morning.
From the Village Juicery, for sure. Highly recommended. But, sleep is so important.
But I'm feeling good now. And, it's nice. Hopefully we can get some nice weather. We're getting there. But I mean, man, it's not, we need over 20 consistently, I think, for us to
for sure.
Yeah. How about yourself? I know we have a new addition to the team and a new addition to your household.
Yes, we do. We have a beautiful little Aussie doodle, and she's been keeping me super busy, very energetic, thank God. This week we actually put her into daycare for 2 days a week, so it gives me like a good 6-7 hour break to just kind of focus on like my clients and do showings and stuff like that. But definitely a lot of walking going on, probably like 5 to 6 walks a day. Yes, that many, you heard correctly, 5 to 6 walks per day. And I'm just keeping busy also with I love doing yoga and Pilates. So you could find me in the studio, the local studio, probably at least 5 days a week. So I think that's really important. And there's, almost like an athlete. I was watching actually a show on Netflix where they were showing, all the top athletes, and not that I'm comparing myself to like the top athletes, but the point is there is a lot of behind the scenes. So I do a lot of, as you know, I have like regular, every 2 weeks I do physiotherapy, and I see a chiropractor locally that I'm really very much impressed with. And, I try to get massage twice a month in, and reflexology. So just things that really make you feel good. And, that allows me to be the best I can for my clients. Cause like you said, there are sometimes a lot of difficult conversations going on. So just things like that. And also just trying to, maintain the relationships, like meet a client for lunch, or, pop by and, give them a little plant or take them out for a coffee, things like that. So
I guess there's different kinds of health. I guess, we have the physical health with the stretching and the weightlifting and all that kind of stuff. And then you have your mental health with your dog and walking and stuff. That's got to help you with that, right? Especially a little one. I'm sure you're not getting the sleep you probably want right away, but that'll change. But I mean, that's fantastic. And what you never told us, what's the dog's name? What's her name?
Her name is Kobe.
Oh, Kobe. And is there a reason for Kobe?
She's named after Kobe Bryant, the basketball player.
There you go. There's some more health there. Some more real estate and health there. So, well, I guess this concludes our episode 5 of Real Estate, Wealth, and Overall Health. So until next time, take care of your real estate,
your wealth,
and your overall health.